The Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes? Greetings. I am Admiral Swart, Commanding Officer, USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for Stardate -269337.1. I am the Admiral in question, and today we're going to be talking about civilian outreach. So there's some misconceptions around, even internally, about what civilian outreach is, and hopefully we'll be able to address all of those during the course of today's presentation. Um, but before we get to that, it's occurred to me that some people might be joining us a little late, and they might not have caught up on all of the briefings videos up until this point. So it became clear to me that I need to do a little bit of recapping. Pretty much every episode, just to remind everybody what it is exactly that we are talking about. So I'm going to start doing that from this episode onwards, and hopefully that will help to alleviate any further misconceptions that might develop among our YouTube audience, or as Captain Van Kroonen says, previously on Briefings with the Admiral. All right, so who are we? What are we doing here? What are we talking about? So we are members of the USS Dauntless, NCC 74214, which is a chapter of Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association Incorporated. It's a fan club. It's a group of people who are interested in Star Trek. It's a Star Trek fan club based in Cape Town, South Africa. We're a Starfleet style club complete with ranks, titles, and uniforms. If you are interested in learning a lot more about us in detail, I did this, which was, I think, the very first, or maybe the second briefing with the Admiral video in the series. If you head over to our website, Dauntless, what is that? It's region8sfi.org/Dauntless. And you take a look there, or you go to our YouTube video. It's our YouTube channel. You can find this video in the Briefings with the Admiral playlist, and you can get an exhaustive exploration of exactly what the Dauntless is. And that's really what this video series is about, is taking a deep dive on different aspects of what the Dauntless is, on Dauntless life, what it means to be a Starfleet officer, how we go about implementing that both internally and in the world. And that is what we're doing and why we are here. Um, Moving in a direction that's more in line with our topic for today, civilian outreach, I want to talk about our mission. So the Dauntless's mission is to bring the message of Gene Roddenberry's vision for the future of mankind to the people of Africa and the Middle East. Why Africa and the Middle East? Because we exist within, as I mentioned, Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association Incorporated, or just called Starfleet International, or SFI for short, which is the real world Starfleet inspired by the fictional Starfleet from the Star Trek film and television series. Um, and Starfleet International is divided up into 20 geographic regions. Africa and the Middle East is the region designated Region 8. So we are a member of Region 8, or the 8th Fleet within SFI. So that is our area of influence, Africa and the Middle East. Although we, the Dauntless, have crew members in all over the place, in the United States, well outside of Region 8, the chapter itself is designated as belonging to Region 8 because that is our official headquarters here in Cape Town, South Africa. So, by way of explaining our mission, we have an interest in the optimistic future as depicted in the Star Trek film and television series. And we want to see the world move in that direction. We think that that would be a good way for the world to be. And so we, as Starfleet officers, which is what we call ourselves, we as Starfleet officers want to take actions in the world that can help to steer things in that direction, which is basically, we hope, just making things better for everybody. One of the ways that we do that now, we've clarified that overall mission in a number of standing orders. And the first one that is relevant for today is standing order number 1, which is to promote Star Trek to our friends, families, and the people around us. And that, in essence, is civilian outreach. That's the civilian outreach project. What do we mean by civilian? So we are Starfleet officers. We exist within this organization, Starfleet International. We have ranks and titles, kind of sort of like the military, but we're not military. We're not paramilitary. We are just kind of sort of a little bit like the military in that way. So anybody who's outside of that institution, we call civilians. That's just a term that we borrowed from that sort of military style milieu that Starfleet, the fictional Starfleet, has in the Star Trek film. So when we talk about civilians, again, within this context, we're talking about people who are not members of Starfleet. So that's the wider public. So standing order number one is to promote Star Trek to our friends, families, and people around us, which is to say civilians. And that is civilian outreach. We are reaching out to civilians to spread the word of Star Trek. And there are a couple of subpoints under that. Promote and represent Star Trek online and in person, which is engaging in Star Trek gaming, Star Trek viewing events, and representing Star Trek and Starfleet at public events. So we're going to go into a bit more about that kind of thing. But why is civilian outreach important? Why does it matter? Well, it is our standing order number one, which means it's the most important reason for our existing. It's why we are here as an organization. What's brought us together is that we think that the utopic vision as depicted in Star Trek, the vision as laid out by Gene Roddenberry, whose photograph is here on the left, we think that that is the way to go, and we have taken it on ourselves as a personal responsibility to move, as I mentioned, the world in that direction. And in order to do that, we need to spread the word of Star Trek. We need to expose other people to the message as envisioned in Star Trek, and also to get people interested in it. Now, what it has an added bonus potentially is of recruiting. So we can add more people to our membership, to our numbers, to recruit new Starfleet officers from that pool of civilians, and hopefully in doing so, spread the word even further. Although we are the Dauntless, we're just one chapter, we also have the capability within Starfleet International of fostering new chapters and new places. In fact, we've done that. We're currently fostering our 5th and 6th daughter chapters simultaneously. These two chapters that we're fostering at the moment are not based here in Region 8, they're based in Region 16, which is Japan. But we have fostered we've fostered chapters all over the world, including several here in Region 8. And that's part of our mission as a Starfleet chapter. In fact, that's represented down here in standing order number 5. But standing order number 1 feeds into standing order number 5. If we're going to launch additional chapters, we need more people, and in order to do that, we need to promote Star Trek to our friends, families, and the people around us, which is to say civilians, convert those civilians into Starfleet officers. And but more importantly than that, recruiting is a secondary outcome of civilian outreach. The primary outcome really is to educate people, civilians, about the values and the philosophy of Star Trek, why we think it's so important, and promoting the ideas contained therein. So what does that look like? How do we do that? Well, first let me just describe the civilian outreach program. So we have a sort of a semi-formalized program aboard the Dauntless that we actually call the civilian outreach program, in which we govern these kinds of activities. And let's just go through that. So it is core to our mission of pursuing Gene's dream. So Gene Roddenberry, who is this guy, not that guy, this guy. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, his dream was of a future in which everything is better. All of the major problems that face mankind today, crime, poverty, war, disease, that kind of thing, have been largely, if not entirely, eliminated. And in this future world, things are better. And he's depicted that world in Star Trek. So in our pursuit of Gene's dream, we help to bring the message of Star Trek to our local communities. The civilian outreach program is the main thrust of that effort. The program isn't a recruiting tool, although often new recruits do find us through these channels. This is our way of supporting the local Star Trek fan communities, consisting of people who love Star Trek but aren't necessarily interested in serving in Starfleet. So that's an important point to note. Although we do hope to recruit new members through the civilian outreach program, that it's not its primary function. And if the people that we're dealing with through the civilian outreach program decide to never join Starfleet, that is okay. That's fine. We can still support them in any way that we feel is necessary. Excuse me, I need to take a sip of my beverage. You might have detected that my voice is a little bit raspy today. I'm dealing with yet another respiratory infection. Hopefully that won't be too much of an issue for us today. The Dauntless has never engaged in active recruiting. Okay, that is out of date. As of this year, we have engaged in active recruiting, but until now, until fairly recently, that was not true. Excuse me. Beg your pardon. Just needed to clear the pipes a little bit there. Obtaining new members isn't the objective of the outreach program. Our goal here remains to support the non-Starfleet community in engaging and growing the Star Trek fandom at large. There are two main legs to the program, and these are social media and civilian-friendly events. Excuse me one more moment. Beg your pardon, I probably shouldn't be talking so much with a sore throat, but I'll do my best. All right, so let's talk about the methods of civilian outreach. So the main thrust of our social media campaign, let me just read the description there. Our communications department operates the Star Trek South Africa Facebook group, in which we encourage civilians to indulge in their love of Star Trek. We promote discussions around news, humor, fan art, and just about anything else of interest to fans. We also use the channel to promote the USS Dauntless from time to time, but we keep that to a minimum. So what is the Star Trek South Africa Facebook group? It looks like this. This is, if you're not logged into your Facebook account, this is what it looks like. And this is it. So we post a fair amount of stuff. All kinds of people post a lot of stuff. You'll see we also post a fair amount of Dauntless material on there because we want to, again, grow the membership of the Dauntless. Although this is not primarily a recruiting tool, we like to forward stuff that is of interest to Star Trek fans to this group so we can all see what's going on there. So this is a publicly available group on Facebook. Again, it's a group, not the page. You're welcome to come and join us and participate in those discussions if you wish. We encourage everybody to post whatever you like on there. Of course, there are the usual Facebook security thingies in place, so new members need to undergo a review process before you can just post, but that's okay. That's, again, us, our communications department, are responsible for managing all that kind of thing. So the Star Trek South Africa Facebook group. There are other online assets out there that have the same name, Star Trek South Africa. I believe there is a Facebook page with that name. There's also an Instagram account with that name. We do not control those. We have no relationship with the people that control those, although we would like to change that. If you are one of the people who are interested, who manage those pages or accounts, please reach out. We would like to get in touch with you about that. As of now, we've had no success in reaching out to those people, and as of now, it's only the Facebook group that belongs to us, that is powered by the USS Dauntless, as it says in that little image there. So that is the Facebook group. And then the other leg of this civilian outreach is events. So public events where we go and represent the Dauntless. And this, I think, is possibly the most important aspect of this. The Facebook page, while it has served us well over the years, Facebook is declining in popularity. Fewer and fewer people are using it actively. And really, there's no equivalent tool on other platforms like Instagram or TikTok or something like that, where we can have sort of an integrated community where people can share things on a basis like that. There's no kind of group feature on those other platforms. So unfortunately, we are losing out on that functionality as more and more people migrate away from Facebook. There's just no current alternative. But we are always on the lookout for new tools that might assist us in promoting that kind of material in the future. So at least for the foreseeable future, until such a tool arises, events are going to be our main thrust going forward, where we can go out physically in the world and represent the Dauntless, the Region 8, Starfleet International, and Star Trek. So what kind of events are we talking about? So we're talking about all kinds, principally conventions that are relevant to people like us. So things like Comic-Con in Joburg, there's an event called Rage that happens every year. There's another one called Icon. These are the big pop culture conventions that happen in Joburg. There's also a Comic-Con in Cape Town where we attend movie screenings, but we also attend other things that are perhaps less obviously linked to us. Things like air shows. Those can be fun. We haven't been to those in a few years, but it's something that we should probably get back on because that was always fun. We could attend those in uniform and look at the various aviation technologies that are happening. And movie screenings are obviously a thing there, although there haven't been any new Star Trek movies since 2016. There is always a possibility of other movies that are not Star Trek, but Star Trek-like sci-fi related films. And if we can organize outings to go and watch those movies in uniform, then that is a good thing. Again, we haven't done those kinds of outings in a few years, but maybe that's something we can look into getting going again. And then another thing that we often participate in is public lectures. So this can be either just as attendees or as speakers. So something like the South African Astronomical Observatory here in Cape Town, they have a monthly lecture series, and we have in the past gone and uh, attended those lectures as members of the audience, sometimes in uniform, sometimes not, but perhaps we should be doing that more frequently and probably in uniform, because if people are interested in space and science, there's a good chance that they're interested in Star Trek, and that's a good place where we can go to represent our values and our mission. But also as speakers. I have been invited on a number of occasions to come and speak in various places. I think there's a photo of me doing that. There we go. No, that's not that. There we go. This was me as a speaker at Comic Con Cape Town this year. This was the second consecutive year in which I was invited to be a guest speaker at Comic Con Cape Town. On both occasions, I was invited to come and do a bit of a sort of a casual comedy routine, I suppose you could call it, about the Klingon language, but then also invited to do another piece of material talking about Star Trek fandom and Starfleet International as a whole. That gave us an opportunity then to not only spread the message of Star Trek, but also talk about the existence of Starfleet, which then allowed us to do a considerable amount of recruiting. A lot of new members came to us through that channel, so that was an invaluable thing to do. But I've also been invited to be a speaker in various other venues, corporate locations, other organizations. And that brings us to the next item on my list, which is collaborations with other organizations. Now, there's not a lot of organizations that have a lot of synergy with us here in the Dauntless, because Star Trek fandom is a relatively niche thing and not a lot of people are into it. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other organizations that are aligned with our interests. So the one that immediately pops to mind is the 501st Legion. If you're not familiar with them, they are a Star Wars fan organization. Their primary focus is costuming, but they also do a lot of charity work, and we've collaborated with them on at least one project. I think that was at Icon back in Joburg 6 or 7 years ago. We did a competitive blood drive with him. That was a lot of fun. It would be nice to be able to do some more work with him in the future. And we've also collaborated with Science Fiction and Fantasy South Africa on a number of occasions. Again, I was an invited speaker to some of their annual events where they asked me to come and speak about Star Trek, which I was pleased to do. But there are also other organizations that don't necessarily align with any of that kind of stuff that could still use our benefit. And that's where our volunteering public service project comes in. So we as individual members are encouraged to go out and do volunteer work with various different organizations. That's what this photo is about. Here I am doing some of my volunteer work with Cheetah Outreach, which is an institution based here in Cape Town. And I do quite a lot of work with them. I don't usually wear my Starfleet uniform while I'm handling cheetahs, but this photograph is of one of the days when I did do so, because actually Cheetah Outreach has their own uniform and I'm required to wear that most of the time. But you get the idea. We're able to collaborate with these other organizations, either formally or informally, either as the Dauntless or as individual members, in order to promote the message of Star Trek, to promote the mission of the Dauntless, and advance society towards that Gene's dream. So, although our public service project and our civilian outreach project are not the same, they are distinct from one another, there are areas where they overlap, and this is one of those. So, volunteering and community service can be a way that we can advance the civilian outreach project, albeit kind of informally and tangentially. Um, so, as individual members, how do we do this? How do we advance the mission? In fact, let's get rid of that. We can transition back to that. There we go. As individual members, how do we go about engaging with the public? What can we do? Now, I've covered a lot of this in previous briefings when we talked about things like how to grow your away team, how to present yourself in the best possible way. There were a few other briefings that dealt with those kinds of things. So I'm going to recover some of that information again today. But the first thing you need to do when you're interacting with the general public, talking about Star Trek and representing the Dauntless, is you need to be approachable and welcoming. So standing there, pointing it, like looking into a corner, examining a potted plant, as Ridge Barkley liked to say in that episode of Next Generation, that is not a very conducive way of behaving in order to engage people about Star Trek or Starfleet. It really helps to be welcoming and engaging, to be open to having conversations with new people. And this is not necessarily a skill that comes naturally to everybody. It might be a skill set that you need to develop in yourself, and there's plenty of information online YouTube and various places like that, where you can learn tricks and skills that can help you to level up that ability. But it's quite important that you're able to do that, especially those of us who are in leadership positions, because we are need to be approachable not only by the general public but also by members who are under our control, not control, under our command. Um, Another thing we need to be ready to do at all times is to share our passion for Star Trek. Being shy about Star Trek or being embarrassed about being a Trekkie, that's not helpful either. We're not going to make any headway if we are shy about that kind of thing. Now, one has to walk a fine line. You don't want to be thought of as one of those people who proselytize their religious messages at inopportune times where people don't necessarily want to hear it. We don't want to be thought of as those kinds of people, but we do want to be seizing any conversational opportunity we can to mention Star Trek and to promote how wonderful it is. Or at least how wonderful we think it is. If you can elucidate a point by using an example from an episode of Star Trek, even in a work meeting, that can be enough to pique somebody's attention. That can help to improve somebody's opinion of Star Trek, that it's not just some silly sci-fi show, that it actually has some serious intellectual backing behind it, or emotional or social or whatever it might be. And that brings me to the next point, which is to focus on the positive aspects of Star Trek. I know that it's popular, especially these days, for fans to publicly dunk on the thing that they love. If you go onto social media, you'll find no shortage of people who claim to be Star Trek fans with nothing but complaints about Star Trek, especially the new Star Trek shows. This is nothing new, of course. Since the Next Generation was released, people had nothing but complaints about that, and every new iteration of Star Trek that's been released since then, people have had nothing but complaints. But we are all still Star Trek fans, and although it might be acceptable for us to gripe about our complaints with each other internally within the context of our private communities, outward facing towards the public, we should be putting forward the best opinions and the best points of view about Star Trek. We should be praising in public and critiquing in private. So when we're talking to other people, we want to be talking about what makes Star Trek good, what makes it wonderful, what makes it amazing, and avoid getting bogged down with complaints or issues we might have with specific aspects of Star Trek. We also want to be mindful of just different perspectives, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. But in this instance, I mean that kind of at a superficial level, which is to say that people who aren't familiar with Star Trek are not familiar with Star Trek. So Star Trek is one of those things where there's a lot of internal jargon and special terminology and ideas that are housed within it. And although a lot of that has permeated out into general popular culture, we can never assume that somebody we're talking to who's not into Star Trek has familiarity with all of those concepts. Things like what is a Vulcan, what is Starfleet, what happens in the 23rd century, what is beaming, what the Starship Enterprise is, who Captain Kirk is. Those are things that are broadly circulating in the popular culture, but you can never assume that the person you're talking to who might not be a Star Trek fan has any of that kind of information to hand. So always be prepared to explain what those things mean and try to use terminology that is more generic and less specific to the Star Trek context. Again, while we're talking in our own private context where we're discussing things here on Discord, use all the jargon you like. That can actually be a competitive sport to see who can remember the most obscure Star Trek word, race, starship, or whatever. I personally find that enjoyable. But out with the public, when we're engaging with people who are not necessarily Star Trek fans yet, or people who are perhaps new Star Trek fans who've just discovered it and haven't yet fully immersed themselves in the experience, we want to be speaking as generically as possible and try to avoid jargon. Relating back to the focusing on positive aspects of Star Trek, we also want to be addressing misconceptions about Star Trek. And there's some superficial misconceptions, things like everybody always says that Kirk's always said, "Beam me up, Scotty," and in fact, he never said those words, "Beam me up, Scotty." That those are the kinds of silly misconceptions we can address, but we can also address important misconceptions about both Star Trek and also about the Star Trek fandom. We're not all people living in our parents' basements who never see the light of day. We actually do enjoy going out. We do things out in the world in daylight. We exercise. We do all kinds of interesting things. We are social. We're not necessarily asocial or antisocial. These are the kinds of misconceptions that exist or stereotypes that exist about Star Trek fans that we can address. But we can do it kindly, and we don't have to take offense when somebody makes an assumption about us, because that's all the information they have about us. We can kindly and patiently address misconceptions they may have and correct them in right there. Use that as an educational opportunity. In fact, I think that is probably the best way to look at it. When somebody comes to you with a misconception they have about Star Trek or Starfleet or Star Trek fandom, and you have then an educational opportunity to enlighten them about what the reality of the situation is. So if you can handle it in that way, if you think of it as a person who needs to be taught something, you can do it patiently and kindly, and still get your message home, address that misconception has happened. Now, once we've done this work, how do we make sure that it's happening? How do we know that we're actually having the impact that we have? One of the ways we can do that is measure our success by gathering feedback. So there's a few ways that we can do that as individual members and as an institution. And overall, I think we could probably be doing better on this. But these are the concepts that we sort of think about when we're considering these kinds of things. Now, the first one is we want to track attendance at events. So firstly, we're tracking our own attendance, members of the Dauntless, who is actually going out and putting boots to ground. We track that very precisely. We keep very good records on who attended where, because it's not only relevant to know how successful we're being, but it's also relevant for promotion tracking and that kind of thing within the Dauntless. We want to help people manage their own Starfleet careers, and in order to do that, we need to know who's turning up and when. So we want to attract we want to track attendance at events, but also civilians. How many civilians are coming with? How many civilians are engaging with the content? How many friends and family members are coming with you to the blood donation missions, or perhaps joining you for parkrun or something like that? We want to keep track of that kind of information as well, so we can get a sense of how broadly our message is being circulated through the civilian population. We also want to monitor online engagement, and again, our primary online channel for this at the moment is that Facebook group, and Facebook provides pretty good statistics on that kind of thing. So we can see who the members of the group are who are doing the most engagement. We can see how many impressions we're getting, how many comments we're getting, likes and dislikes, and that kind of thing. All of that data is readily available to us, so that's relatively easy to obtain. If we start using other online platforms, we'll have to be careful about setting up the appropriate statistics gathering tools so that we can monitor that engagement there as well. It might also be helpful to solicit feedback. So this can be in the form of a survey that gets sent out to people so that we can ask them questions about that kind of thing, or it could be one-on-one feedback. So once you've had an interaction with a civilian, you can perhaps ask them questions about how well you've done. It might be a little bit weird, depending on the context. So pick your moment for doing this kind of thing, but that is not a terrible idea. You want to be phrasing your interactions in such a way that you can get feedback from the people that you're dealing with, either explicitly or implicitly. So I'd like to reiterate the importance of civilian outreach in promoting Star Trek and its values. Now, this is something that is so important that we have selected it as our mission and our standing order number one. If we really think that the world would be better in the Star Trek future, in this optimistic world, this Gene's dream, it really does require us to make moves, to do things, to take action in the world, to help to steer uh, the future in that direction, in a positive direction. Now, that doesn't mean we have to try to emulate every aspect of the Star Trek universe, but we can be doing things here or there to try and raise awareness of how the world could be as envisioned by Gene Roddenberry. And the more people that are aware of that, the better that can be. It also, again, offers us recruiting opportunities. More people in our fold allows us to do more things. It also, we want to be encouraging participants to actively engage in outreach efforts. So that's people on board. So if you are not already engaging in outreach efforts, then get on that. let's get going. If you are in an away on an away team and you know that there is an event happening in your area, schedule an away mission so that members of your away team can join. If you are a member of a one-man away team, that's okay. You can go there anyway, meet up with some of your civilian friends and family there, but do it as an official representative of the Dauntless, as an away team leader. If you're not sure how to do that, you might remember that we did a whole briefing video on away missions some time ago, which outlines the procedure for how to handle all of that. Speaking of which, there are some resources that you might be interested in accessing. Let me get back to that. Hang on. No, I've hidden that page. There we go. All right, cool. That's not the right tab, though. There we go. All right, so some resources that you would find on the Dauntless Discord. So if you go to the resources item there on the menu, you'll find this channel where there are a bunch of interesting links that will help you find what you need. And one of those that is possibly the most important resource in this section is this. So this is a digital flashcard. You can carry a copy of this image file on your pad, that is your phone or your tablet or whatever, and any member of the public that you encounter who you think might be interested in learning more about the Dauntless, whether it is a potential new recruit or just somebody you'd like to educate about who we are and what we do, you can present this to them and they can scan it using their device. This will then take them to our website and they can learn more about us from there. So this is a very important tool. Head over to the resources channel on Discord and you can download this and have a copy of it ready to go whenever you are ready. So that's an important resource. If you're interested in collaborating in the Civilian Outreach Project, you can head to the Project Assignments channel here and select the option for Civilian Outreach. It's this little Federation logo there. I'm not going to go to that channel there because there is personal identifying information in there, so I'm not going to display the channel here, but it will display the Civilian Outreach channel underneath the communications category there, so you can come and participate in discussions around the civilian outreach endeavor there if you wish to. All right, that is all the material I needed to cover. What I would like to cover now quickly is if we have any comments or questions, and I see there's been some conversation in the chat. Then you scroll up a little bit. There we go. Excuse me. Lieutenant Commander Shamali says, I don't understand what the folks that don't want to join up. Why would you not want to hang out with like-minded geeks, play video games together, share ideas and concepts? Such a great community. Personally, I feel like I've come home. Well, I'm very pleased to hear you say that. I appreciate you saying that, Commander. I agree. It feels like a no-brainer that this is the place for people like us to come to, and why not come and join in? You can be part of our group. But also people who aren't necessarily Star Trek fans or who are new to the Star Trek fandom might feel a little bit intimidated by us. That's why we have that sort of a second circle of the community, of the civilian outreach community, that can then act as a funnel perhaps for recruiting for those people to join us in the future. Captain Procurement says, right, they have no idea what they're missing out on. Quite right. And that might be a failing on our part. Perhaps we're not doing a good enough job of exposing everybody to what it is that we are doing so that they can see what they're missing out on, and hopefully we can trigger their FOMO, which hopefully will persuade them to join us after the fact. Commander Shamali says, Icon is also in Durban now. Oh, fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. I know that they've done, over the years, experiments with running events around the country. The main Icon, of course, is run in Joburg, but satellite events around the country, that's good news. Icon was kind of sad and small this year. That does happen. The problem that Icon faces is that they are competing directly with Comic-Con Africa, which is now the biggest pop culture event on the continent, and it's right there in their backyard. Happens in a similar time of year, so I can understand the challenges there. But I think that Grant, who is the organizer of that event, he is working the problem every year and trying different things to see what he can do to distinguish himself from other pop culture conventions in the region, so that he can grow the Icon back to where it was once, which was, at one time, it was the largest popular culture convention in the sector. Commander Shimali says we should go to the Alien one. I think she's talking about movie premieres. That's not a bad idea. I would not want to go to the current Alien movie that's in theaters at the moment. Not again. I'll try to avoid critiquing in public, but certainly future similar movies would be similar. Commander Shamali also says, I listened to this talk. I think she's referring to my Klingon talk at this year's Comic-Con Cape Town. The Klingon was great. Unless you're trying to lure a botanist into our ranks. Yes, indeed. Commander Shimali says, we're universally addicted to the nostalgia. No matter what they put out, won't measure up to the nostalgia we have for our favorite series, movie, etc. Yes, exactly. So there's a tendency among fandoms, and Star Trek and Star Wars are particularly susceptible to this. Star Trek and Star Wars fandoms, that is, that whatever version of that franchise existed as we were sort of coming on board, that is sort of crystallized as the canon, and then any new stuff that might change or update that vision or your personal perspective of what canon is, that kind of ruins it forever. I try to steer clear of that kind of thinking, although I have, um, I have my favorites of which parts of canon I think are the best and which parts are my least favorite. They all are still Star Trek, right? Star Trek is Star Trek. We don't have to love every single episode equally, but we still love Star Trek. We also, incidentally, don't get to choose what is or isn't canon. That's not up to us. So whatever comes happens to be canon, and that's just how it is, whether we particularly love that episode or that season or that series or not. So it's all Star Trek, and if we love Star Trek, then we have to love that, but perhaps we can love it a little bit less than some of the other stuff. Master Chief Custer says, how people can hate a series because of its theme song is weird. Well, I mean, I know what you're talking about there. We're talking Faith of the Heart, right? But, you know, fortunately, Star Trek Enterprise is on Netflix now, and there is a skip intro button that allows you to just sail right on past that theme song. So if you are like me and it's not your favorite song, you can just ignore it. It's fine. Captain Funkrina says, take your pot plant with if it makes things more comfortable talking to strangers. Sure, I guess you can do that. Whatever coping strategies you might need. Commander Shamali says, this exact flashcard is what got me. Yes. So we introduced this particular flashcard, the one I showed you a little earlier this year, and it's served us well. We've already managed to get a few new recruits off that flashcard. It was great. Captain Van Kernen says, and if you read the Latin just right, you can summon a space whale. Sure, I guess. Commander Shamali says, is Charlton Station named after Grant? Yes. So Grant Stanley Charlton is the organizer of Icon. He also is the manager / owner of one of the big gaming stores up in Joburg. And there is one of our daughter chapters. Charlton Station is the chapter of is the SFI chapter based in Johannesburg. They named their chapter after Grant Stanley Charlton because he was the inspiration for creating the social group that brought those members together. So they thought that they would honor him and his legacy by naming their chapter after him, which I thought was delightful. All right, we also have comments on YouTube today. That's fantastic. So Recruit Duran says, I'm always proud of being a Trekkie, and when I can explain to people how it explores ethics in a good way, and many episodes unpack both sides of ethics. I agree. That's one of the things that I think is most interesting about Star Trek is that unlike something like Star Wars, for example, there's no clear delineation between good and evil. In any given narrative context, you've got protagonists and antagonists, but even people like the Klingons or the Romulans or the Cardassians and the Borg, they're never depicted as being pure evil. They just have a different perspective, which might be at odds with our perspective, and it might make getting along with them difficult. But they're not evil; they're just different, and I think that's uh, um, one of the most important things about the ethics of Star Trek is that it's definitely possible to look at the same concept from both sides. And also, we now have so many episodes, close to 1,000 episodes of Star Trek, that you'll often find with any given ethical or philosophical point, there are multiple episodes examining that same point from different angles. So you might find in the original series, there's a particular perspective on a philosophical aspect, but then back later in the Next Generation, you have the same exact concept being examined, but now the Enterprise crew are looking at it from a different point of view, and then the Voyager crew come at it at 90 degrees from that, and so on. It's very, very interesting. Commander Shamali says, yeah, I love Grant. He knew my dad. Fantastic. Yes, no, Grant's a great guy. Senior Chief Newton says, not the time or place. Okay, he's just having an argument with the EMH who's inserting himself into the conversation here. But I think that is all the feedback we have for now. Senior Chief Newton also says, I'll take whatever flack comes my way for this, but Faith of the Heart is an awesome theme song, especially from season 3 onwards. That's fine. You're entitled to that opinion. I'm not going to fight you on that one. It's not my favorite, but that's okay. Enterprise is still a great series, so I particularly enjoy that show. But I admit I do cringe my way through the theme song a little bit every time. But that's okay. That's perfectly acceptable. We don't all have to have favorites. We don't have to love every aspect of Star Trek in order to love Star Trek as a whole. All right, but I think that is all the feedback we have for now. So we're going to call it there. Remember, these briefings are recorded on Tuesdays, middle of the day. They go out live on the Dauntless Discord server on the Screening Room channel. You're welcome to participate there. We also stream live to YouTube. You can watch the video on YouTube after the fact. We also upload to our Facebook page after the fact. Sometimes we'll share those to the Star Trek South Africa Facebook group if the topic of the video in question is relevant. I think we'll probably share this one there. But usually you can, or all of the time, you can find them on the Facebook page. That's where they go. If you're not able to join us live, which is perfectly acceptable because middle of the day on a Tuesday can be difficult for a lot of people. It's not exactly convenient. But that is where you can find us. If you have any questions or comments after the fact, please feel free to drop them. Again, Discord, Facebook, YouTube, Telegram, whatever communication system is suitable for you, you can send me a message there, and I'll either try to address your question there and then, or perhaps we'll include it in an upcoming video. So thank you, everybody. That is all for today. You are dismissed. Swart out.